Welcome to Village Church Connections. I'm David Pavey. When I began studies in the Chicago area in the late 50s, I was soon acquainted with, "Hello Americans, this is Paul Harvey. Stand by for news." For a start, one of my professors would rarely miss Paul Harvey's broadcasts, and I sometimes listened with him. Then again, Harvey lived locally and would sometimes show up at our church, though careful to leave early to avoid being mobbed, which is why I never met him personally, unfortunately. Like many, I also came to appreciate Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story programs. So let me share one of those entitled The Old Man and the Gulls, which caught my attention recently, quoted in Heaven Bound Living by Paul Orant. It goes something like this. It was gratitude that prompted an old man to visit a shabby, broken pier on the eastern seacoast of Florida. Every Friday night until his death in 1973, he would return, walking slowly and slightly stooped, with a large bucket of shrimp. The seagulls would flock to this old man, and he would feed them from his bucket. Many years before, in October 1942, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker was on a mission in a B-17 to deliver an important message to General Douglas MacArthur in New Guinea. But there was an unexpected detour which would hurl Captain Eddie into the most harrowing adventure of his life. Somewhere over the South Pacific, the flying fortress became lost, beyond the reach of radio. Fuel ran dangerously low, so the men ditched their plane in the ocean. For nearly a month, Captain Eddie and his companions fought the water and the scorching sun. They spent many sleepless nights, recoiling as giant sharks rammed their crafts. The largest raft was 9 feet by 5. The biggest shark was 10 feet long. But of all their enemies at sea, one proved most formidable: starvation. 8 days out, their rations were long gone or destroyed by salt water. It would take a miracle to sustain them. And a miracle occurred. Said Rickenbacker, Captain William Cherry conducted the Christian service that afternoon, and we concluded with a prayer for deliverance and a hymn of praise. There was some talk, but it tapered off in the oppressive heat. With my hat pulled down over my eyes to keep out some of the glare, I dozed off. Suddenly, something landed on my head. I knew that it was a seagull. I don't know how I knew, I just knew. Everyone else knew too. No one said a word, but peering out from under my hat brim, without moving my head, I could see the expression on their faces. They were staring at that gull. The gull meant food, if I could catch it. And the rest, as they say, is history. Captain Eddie caught the gull. Its flesh was eaten, its intestines were used for bait to catch fish, the survivors were sustained, and their hopes renewed because of a lone seagull that had uncharacteristically, hundreds of miles from land, offered itself as a sacrifice. And now you also know that Rickenbacker never forgot, because every Friday evening about sunset, on a lonely stretch along the eastern Florida seacoast, you could see an old man walking, white-haired, bushy eyebrows, slightly bent, his bucket filled with shrimp to feed the gulls, to remember with thanksgiving that one seagull, which one day long past had given itself without a struggle and saved the lives of Eddie and his men. In the Bible, there's a moving story about Jesus healing 10 lepers. But exceptionally, it isn't the healing that's the point of the story, but what happened afterwards. The 10 men were social outcasts because of their disease. They didn't even dare to approach Jesus to ask for his help, but they stood at a distance and called for him to have pity on them. Mercifully, Jesus healed all 10 of them, but strangely, only one of them returned to thank Jesus, and he was a Samaritan, a hereditary enemy of the Jews. So why was he the one to come back, rather than 9 Jewish men? Perhaps it was because he had a deeper sense of what had been done for him than the 9 had. If a Jewish miracle worker healed a Jew, it was wonderful, but for him to heal a Samaritan was going above and beyond the call of duty. It was entirely grace, unmerited favor. This story reminds us that those who are most conscious of what's been done for them are the closest to the heart of God and the most thankful. Eddie Rickenbacker had his unique way of thanking a lonely seagull he reckoned had saved his life. At this time of year particularly, we reflect on God's blessings, and those who are grateful give him thanks. The old hymn says it well: count your blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. So take time today to thank God for his goodness and mercy, and especially for the gift of eternal life offered to all who believe. And thank you for tuning in to Village Church Connections.